Okay, this next one is this is my impression of the kid who just got a PS2 for Christmas on the bus. Hey, can I borrow your memory card? Why not? This week we saw the return of the III Initiative. It's a gaming showcase that's built for indies only. Incidentally, there were somehow 0 narrative-driven third-person shooters in the entire thing. No, this show's got its own vibe, and it's proud to tell you, no hosts, no ads, just games. Probably worth saying, though, that it does seem that it's a certain upper tier of indie games in the III Initiative. They say that means nothing, they say it means nothing. But for me, it's just a nice opportunity for trend spotting. What kind of games are indie developers interested in making in 2026, and how do they want to advertise them? And one of the things I was struck by is that a lot of the games they showed are not just co-op games, sure, but hanging out games. You know, just spending time in a world together. Seems a really important shot is the crew shot. Just you and your friends side by side, building stuff. Look at you. This is you failing until
our survivor has found a friend.
So what's strange to see is that I think that game designers are almost tapping into an entirely new video game purpose. Because traditionally, right, video games are made to be beaten. You want to win in a video game. You want high scores in a video game. And I'm not saying that, cooperative games about hanging out are not competitive. Super Battle Golf is competitive. You're still trying to win in this game. But here, one of my favorite trailers amongst all of the 40 that they showed was one where the game's creator is just calmly explaining the game's entire appeal.
I'm making a game about sledding and hanging out with your friends called Sledding You. It's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. You sled with friends, you can race, you can do cool tricks and stuff. There's also a bunch of other fun things to do when you're not sledding, like snowball fights. Or fishing.
Oh my god. I hate you so much.
You can also just kind of hang around if you want.
That reminded me of a moment from the reveal of Horizon Hunter's Gathering.
It is also just a fun place. For example, you can hang out in your own customizable campsite and then head back into the wild.
It's a similar idea, but I don't feel like any of that seemed like a good hang. Something about this guy, I don't want to be near him. So I think there's something to it. I think you can just make a game that's essentially just a fantastical space for friends to hang out in. Like, for instance, if you told me I could hang out with my friends in an imaginary space station or wizard's attic for 1 hour, I would do that. I would pay you for that. That sounds fun. But if you add puzzles and a time limit and call it an escape room, suddenly everyone is much more excited. We have a shared common goal. Everybody's in. I think video games still need that, but I think there's truly another whole component of friend slop games. They're not all friend slop. They're not all friend slop, but I feel like we're all just dancing around that phrase. Might as well say friend slop. Anyway, another trend I was really surprised to see throughout this independent games showcase is how much developers seem concerned about the content that content creators would make based off of these video games. Final Sentence advertised itself as the most viral game of the fall. Just a reminder, this was a showcase that was watched by indie game fans. Why would they care what's viral? And then Dead as Disco introduced a phrase I don't think I've ever seen in a trailer before: streamers safe tracks. I'm not sure how much I should explain to this audience, but just in case you have no idea what that means, when you're streaming a video game on Twitch or YouTube, sometimes you can get muted or just completely have your channel taken offline if you're using music that is licensed to someone else. So in recent years, you'd actually see the option in many video games menus to turn on unlicensed music, basically generic music, so that if you are streaming it, you won't get in trouble for it. And that would even happen sometimes for games where the music's super important and ingrained into what the game is doing, like Hi-Fi Rush or Dispatch. And I think streamer safe tracks here in bold letters as an advertised feature for a broad audience, it will only be relevant to a small handful of which, is just sort of proof how important streaming is to the success of a video game like that. But I didn't realize how important it was until after the III initiative. So after a few trailers, you'd see this message, more about this game at the post-show. But then it happened so many times, you started wondering, how long's the post-show? Turns out the III initiative main show, no host, no ads, just games, that was about 45 minutes long. The post-show was about 2 hours long. And the dives were so deep that unfortunately, hosts were necessary.
Welcome to the Dead as Disco preview.
A lot of that stuff was post-show material.
Just asking.
Yeah, explain again what you're doing today.
Wow.
Who's this guy?
I don't know.
Oh, hello.
Good talk.
And I would have dipped out when most of the audience does too. However, the very first post-show deep dive really caught my attention. Featured developer Bun Muen talking about his game Shift at Midnight. Firstly, I think Bun is immediately a good presenter, an entertaining person. Like, you can't just show clips of LeBron James or use Mario Kart music in your promotional material. But like, if you're in your 20s and mostly watch TikTok, how would you even know you're not supposed to do that? And realistically, who's going to stop him? But really what I found fascinating, and why I stopped and listened to his whole 10-minute speech, is just how truthful this thing was. So maybe the first time I've heard a game developer say,
I'll do anything for success.
He says he wants to make a horror game because those are popular, even though...
I'm terrified of horror games.
And then the stated goal isn't necessarily to make the horror game good, but popular. And here's how you achieve that.
We'll need content creators to play my game. And I'm not talking about any random content creators. I'm talking about the big three of horror games. So goal number 1, Queso. Consistently a top 3 streamer on Twitch. Number 2, Markiplier. OG of the game, 40 million subs, needs no introduction.
My name is Markiplier.
And number 3, Corey. Averages 10 million views a video, but he's gonna be the hardest because of his extremely inconsistent upload schedule.
And no, that's not like a joke, right? That's not like a lofty, jokey goal. He's serious. He even lays out his plan to get there.
See, on Itch, there are thousands of YouTubers with less than 100 subs that play every horror game that comes out. Once we have a bunch of videos from those smaller creators, we can use that as leverage to contact bigger creators. Then bigger, then bigger, then the big three. Flawless plan.
Now, typically, if a game designer said, first and foremost, I want my game to be streamed by these specific streamers, I would say, that's disgusting. Just make something you love. However, Bun already said he's not trying to make something he loves. He's trying to make $1 million. And in that way, I find this approach incredibly refreshing, if also maybe completely antithetical to what most indie games are about. But here, I love how straightforward this part is.
I found a guy on Fiverr to do the thumbnail for the game, and he did an incredible job. Shout out Pedro G on Fiverr. Everyone send this guy love.
Firstly, yeah, it's nice to see him supporting an independent artist like that. But primarily what I find so interesting is the language used. He hired somebody to make a thumbnail for a video game. Typically, we'd call that box art or key art, right? But I think Bun acknowledging the significance, the importance of a thumbnail for a video game is next generation. Look, if you go to his website, you'll find this, one of the first things. Struggling to make a thumbnail? Use the press kit below for key art. And then, yeah, sure enough, YouTube thumbnails right there for you. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Let me make mine really quick. Anyway, I was watching that interview for Dead as Disco. Remember, that's the streamer safe music game. This guy on the left is doing a great job. But really, I was watching because I wanted a clip. I was scouring for a clip to show that the developers had a purity in their intent. And I did find one.
Our goal was just like fun, right?
It's
like
so
you
fun.
play it and just moment to moment, fun. And it's my favorite game that I've ever worked on. Honest to goodness.
But I also found that they too bring up TikTok a lot.
What would happen if you had a TikTok dance video, but it's a video game, right? Well, 300 million TikTok hashtag views or something like that. People love to play it. It's great on TikTok. Like, that's where we blew up.
This initial pitch of like, you know, Bruce Lee brawling to the beat on TikTok. What if you had John Wick meets Baby Driver?
Somebody went and modded Shrek into the game with Shrek's level.
Always the first mod.
Was busting face to Smash Mouth, right? And got 5 million views. 5 million views on TikTok.
It all leads me to believe that Bun Nguyen will indeed achieve his dream of making $1 million by making a game that he doesn't even want to play. And if you're wondering, he did manage to bag 2 of his 3 targets, but I really think his humble presentation should be studied not just by independent game creators, but also larger gaming companies. For instance, Marathon had the marketing budget for prop comedy pranks and 8-minute music videos, yet they couldn't pony up the $250 on Fiverr to buy themselves one good thumbnail. Gotta work on those priorities. And that's delayed input for this week and the end of the Scarf season officially. Delayed input will return May 8th. It's a Friday. Of course, there will be some sort of in-betweener video that will pop up sometime before that day. So until then, thanks for watching. So a couple of weeks ago, I was noting how Starfield was trying to reinvigorate its marketing, breathe some new life into the game. As some new DLC expansions and the PlayStation 5 version are coming out, there was a pivot. And also, I have established previously that one of my favorite subgenres of video game advertisements is when they hire an unrelated actor to try to give some legitimacy to a video game.
And knowing Jin possessed the devil gene, Heihachi would use Jin until ultimately betraying his grandson, shooting him at point-blank range in the face.
Well, we got a new one of those this week. This is Starfield, featuring Keith David. By the way, I know this is nerdy grammar stuff, and it never actually looks right, but you really should always capitalize the word "is" in a title. Like in the 2013 comedy film, This Is the End. Or the 2016 TV drama, This Is Us. Anyway, Keith David is great in the ad. The script is kind of crazy because it bounces between philosophical lore for the games world and then bullet points for the DLC.
Now there's more to see, more stories to be told, more systems to be settled.
But there's one part that doesn't seem quite right. This part right here.
And somewhere along the way, the crew beside you becomes family.
Did you see it? No, I'm not talking about this guy crossing his arms with his knuckles out. We went over that. But yeah, it's worth reiterating. You gotta tuck in your knuckles. And no, I'm not even talking about the guy sweeping with a broom in a spaceship. I think that's funny. Just watch it one more time.
The crew beside you?
Yeah. That guy disappears. And still, I haven't played Starfield. I don't know. So I looked it up. I was like, is this guy is he a hologram? Is he a ghost? Just doesn't seem so. The wiki doesn't suggest at any point that this guy can turn invisible. So I was bouncing some theories around. Firstly, I was thinking maybe that's just it's like an engine thing, that it just kind of fades characters in and out as the camera cuts around, and what we're seeing is the final frame before a cut. However, that would suggest that this was overlooked, that there was some sort of mistake in this trailer, which I think with a marketing budget like that is simply not possible. They hired Keith David.
That belongs to me.
So look again. We never see this guy's hands. We don't know what he's doing down there. He could be doing anything. He could be, putting on a little Lord of the Rings ring down there. We don't know. Do I think that's happening? No. No. But I think they want to keep us guessing. In fact, I bet that every other weekly video game news-focused YouTube upload is probably focused on the disappearance of the character Barrett from Starfield. In that way, I kind of feel used. I feel like just another checkpoint on the mountain climb to getting Markiplier's attention.